All right. Appreciate everyone for joining us for Coach Franklin's weekly press conference. We'll start with an opening statement from Coach, and then we'll open up for questions.
Hey, guys. Like always, appreciate everybody coming and covering Penn State football. Obviously, following up on last week's game, there's nobody that's more disappointed than the guys in our locker room and the guys on our staff. We also understand what the expectations are and what the standards are, and we embrace those things. When you kind of look back at the game, for opportunities for growth, some things that we got to get fixed is we got to be more disciplined. We're giving too many yards away, or extending drives, or creating field position, and the margin of error and with teams like that is too small. So we got to get those things cleaned up. It's concerning when it happens on back-to-back weeks. So we got to get that cleaned up and addressed as soon as possible. We talk about some key statistics in the game. Third down was a key statistic in the game. I thought defensively we had 3 drives that you'd like to be different and be execution at a little bit different level. You got to give them credit for a plan. But 3 drives, the 2 scoring drives, and then the drive at the end of the game. And then obviously offensively, the interception in the end zone and the goal line stand, those 2 things were difference makers in the game. I did think that Zion Tracy is really coming on not only as a defensive player, but also as a special teams player. Looked a lot more confident catching punts and returning punts. Zach Key continues to trend in a real positive direction for our team. Barker's 2 for 2 and 8 for 8 has been a real positive. And I thought Gabe played one of his best games, 3 touchbacks, and then the deep kick on the kick after the penalty, where I think we were able to still get him stopped at the 26-yard line. That was big. So overall, obviously, we got some things that we got to continue to work on. But most importantly, we're on to Washington, and we got to find a way to get a win this week. I thought the staff and the players did a good job last night and yesterday of making the corrections and then moving on to Washington. We got to make sure that 1 loss doesn't turn into 2, and that's controlling the things that we can in our building and flushing it. Although, whether it's on campus or in the community or whether it's on social media, that makes it more challenging for specifically our players to do that. But we got to make sure that we've moved on, because we got to find a way to get a win against a really good Washington team coming into our place. I've known Jed Fish for a long time. Respect Jed and what he's done over his career. He's got a ton of experience at a ton of different places. Obviously did a really good job at Arizona. Left and took the Washington job, and is doing a nice job there. So this will be a challenge. They hit the transfer portal hard. I don't know if I have the numbers here with me, but I want to say they have 12 or 13 players from the transfer portal on both offense or defense. And defense. You look at what they're doing. Offensively, Brendan Carroll, these are 2 guys that he's got a background with as coordinators from his time in the NFL, and specifically with his time with the Patriots and the Seahawks. Brendan Carroll is doing a nice job with their offense. He's got an O-line background. They want to run the ball. They're committed to running the ball, but they've had really good production out of 2 wide receivers as well. But they're an 11 and a 12 personnel team, which is a pretty consistent theme that we've had all year long. Will Rogers, the transfer quarterback from Mississippi State, is doing well. The running back, Jonah Coleman, got a lot of respect for him. Big, thick back who's hard to bring down, 5'9", 230 pounds. And then obviously their receiver, Denzel Boston, who is leading the Big Ten in touchdown catches. is doing some really good things. And then another NFL guy and name that you guys will be familiar with is Steve Belichick, who is their defensive coordinator, has spent pretty much his entire career with the Patriots, and then I think in college at Rutgers with Schiano. And statistically, their numbers are really good, specifically when you talk pass defense. We've been impressed with their linebacker number 42, Carson Bruner, their defensive end and linebacker number 11, and their safety number 13. Really, really good players that have been productive this year. And then their special teams coordinator, Jordan Paopao, has done a great job for them. The two guys that jump out to us is Denzel Boston again as a punt returner as well as a wide receiver. And then their kick returner and wide receiver number 15, Keith Reynolds. Two guys that have been very, very productive for us. And we need to be aware of where they're at all times and try to limit their production on special teams. So open it up to questions.
Let's go to Rich Garcella with the Reading Eagle.
Good afternoon, James. How are you today?
Good, Rich. How are you?
I'm well, thanks. James, after having a chance to review the film, what did you see from that goal line stand in terms of personnel, execution, and play calls? And what's your biggest takeaway from those 4 plays?
Well, I think first of all, obviously we didn't get movement. We didn't get movement up front. We got two of the better running backs in the country. You want to try to, feed those guys and allow them to get downhill. They've done a really good job of it, not only this year, but kind of throughout their careers. I think that's the right thing to do, but I also think there's a piece where you can say in critical moments, you got to think players, not plays. And, maybe in one of those 3 downs at least, you got to make sure Tyler Warren touches the ball. However that is, whether it's Wildcat, whether that is in the passing game, or whether that is as a ball carrier. But again, I think we got 2 really good running backs that we feel good about, and those guys have got to touch the ball as well. So that's probably the biggest thing. I think when you do throw the ball, you're going to have to understand that they're just as aware of Tyler Warren as we are trying to get the ball to him. Likelihood is that guy is going to be double teamed as well. So obviously hindsight is 20/20, but at the end of the day, the reality is you got to be able to create movement and score when you need 1 yard, whether that is picking up a critical 4th down or whether that is goal line. And we got to do some things better scheme wise, but also we got to do a little bit better job fundamental and technique wise to make sure we get the movement that we need.
Let's go to Frank Bodani, followed by Mark Wogenrich.
Hey, good afternoon, James. Thanks for your time.
You too, Frank.
Appreciate it. The running game, at least, it doesn't seem to be as productive or going as smoothly as it was earlier in the year, especially Nick. I think he only has 90 combined rushing yards the last 3 games. How do you view that? And if you view it that way at all, how do you go about fixing that, so to speak, right now?
Yeah, I think our traditional running game with the 2 running backs, we got to get going. You look at it, obviously when you compare it to the beginning of the year and now, it's, competition plays a part in that. Obviously, who you play plays a big part in that. But I think there's some things that we got to do, in terms of scheme to make them defend the field. And spread the box out as much as possible, whether that is outside zone, whether that is gap schemes, whether that is inside zone, whether that is personnel. I think some of the heavy stuff has been really good to us, but it's the age-old argument, right? Whether it's the run game or the pass game, if you go heavy, they got a chance to go heavy as well. They got a chance to match personnel. You bring in another lineman, they bring in another lineman. You take a lineman out, which sometimes I think, people wonder why you do that. Well, you put more wide receivers in and you spread the field, you make them defend the field. That's one less block you have to make in the box. No different in pass protection. Everybody thinks to throw the ball down the field, you have to keep more guys in, but they're also going to bring more people the more guys you keep in pass protection. So we got to get our traditional running game going. I think that's going to be a combination of both. Still doing some of the heavy stuff we're doing, but I think we could expand on some of the spread stuff as well to get some guys out of the box to create more space. And then also from a scheme standpoint as well, making sure that we're making them defend the field as much as possible. So outside runs, outside zones, which also could have an impact on inside zones and gap schemes as well.
Let's go to Mark Wogenrich, followed by Johnny McGonigal.
Hey, James, how are you?
Good, Mark. How are you?
Good, thanks. In July, you said of this season, we've got to play our best when our best is needed most in the biggest games and the biggest moments. How would you assess then the program this season in that context?
Yeah, I think a couple of things. Obviously, after the game that we just played, we did not do that in that game. Again, just like the comment I made about the run game, the competition factors into that. At the end of the day, we lost to a top 5 team and one of the top programs in the country, and we had opportunities to win the game, and we've had opportunities to win those types of games in the past. We got to find a way to get it done, and that starts with me. But I'm also very, very proud of where our team has been consistently. And I think most programs in the country would be envious of where we have been on a consistent basis pretty much over 10 years.
Let's go to Johnny McGonigal, followed by Mike Gross.
Good afternoon, James.
Hey, Johnny.
You mentioned after the game that all your goals are still ahead of you, and a part of that is the 12-team playoff. Do you think the way the wide receivers, the production and what they've given you guys, has that been enough to, looking forward, get to where you guys want to ultimately go?
Yeah, I think that's a fair question. I think we have improved. I don't think there's any doubt about it. From last year, we've improved on the field, in practice. Production, I haven't checked this statistically, but I don't know if we had games last year where we had multiple receivers at times, different games go for over 100 yards, which we have had this year. I don't know if we've had at times last year guys step up in critical moments and make clutch plays when it was needed most. So I think there has been significant strides made there, but there's still more work to do. And I think that last game is an example of that. We have got to be able to threaten people. We got to be able to stretch people. We've got to be able to make plays and create separation and make tough catches. That needs to happen. I think that needs to be an emphasis really for the rest of the season. I think that question and the question that I just got, being able to run the ball more consistently in traditional running sets with traditional running backs, and be able to make more plays in the passing game at the wide receiver position is going to be really important, not only for this game, but long-term for this season and where we want to go.
Last question from Zoom, Mike Gross.
Good afternoon, James. How are you?
Good, Mike. How are you?
Good, thanks. Talking about discipline, as you mentioned earlier, I'm wondering how you can kind of teach that and coach that in the middle of the season or within the season. For example, the taunting call on Saturday. I mean, that may have been a marginal call. He may not have intended to really taunt there, but it's discipline. It seems to me would don't even give the ref a chance to make that call. So it seems to me like that would be a hard thing to teach and coach and work on while you're working on everything else in a game week. So how do you coach that? How do you work on that?
I think the first thing, I think your point is a good one. I did not turn that in to the Big Ten officials this week because I know what the response would be. Technically, by the rules, there's justification for making that call. I also know I watch college football, not only on TV, but I watch tons of hours of cut-ups. That call could be made 5 or 6 times a game in every game in college football. So for me to turn it in and for them to say, well, technically that is, I didn't turn it in. But I think the way you address it is in a team meeting setting, it needs to be addressed. So not only does that player learn, but the whole team learns, not only in a team meeting setting, but then also on either side of the ball, offense or defense. It needs to be addressed. It needs to be addressed with the individual, which it has, and it needs to be addressed with the group, which it has. That's how you address it. Is you face it head on. You have the conversation. Where I think it's concerning is if it happens in back-to-back weeks. That's concerning. Where you feel like you've addressed something and it happens again.
We'll go to questions in the room over here, Mark.
Times, Jim. Thanks for your time.
You too.
Excuse me. James, after going back and looking at the tape, what is your take on the defense's performance on that last drive by Ohio State and the way that they were kind of able to move the ball?
Yeah, the last drive was concerning, right? Starting with the quarterback sneak for 4 yards. Obviously, we needed to score in that goal line drive. But you could also make the case that them having the ball at the 1 yard line, getting a safety, puts us in an unbelievable situation now to go win the game. Because you get a safety there, 2 points. Now you get the ball back, you go down, and now not only do you score, but you score and take time off the clock, and now you have enough points to win the game in regulation. So as an optimist, there was an opportunity there to really do something special. And whether those are championship drives from an offensive perspective or whether they're defensive gut checks, you have got to be able to stop the run when everybody in the stadium knows that they're going to run the ball. Just like on offense, you got to have the attitude. You got to be able to run the ball when everybody in the stadium knows you have to run the ball. And that did not happen in that scenario. I was very pleased with our defense. I think that team was averaging 40 points a game. So I think overall, you look at how we played against them. I think we played well. But there are 3 drives in that game where I don't think we played up to the standard of how we've played this year and how we played specifically in that game.
Over here in the middle, John.
Hey, James.
Hey, John.
You mentioned on Saturday post game the introspective part of this, looking in the mirror and all that stuff. You've had a couple of days to do that. What do you feel like you've learned about how you handle these games? And is there anything you wish you personally would have done different, whether it's how you handle the lead up to the game or the game itself?
Yeah. Obviously always introspective. This game and this week, I feel like myself and the coaching staff handled it very different than how we had in the past. So there was a ton of time spent on that in the off season. There was a ton of time spent on that during the week, being very intentional about how we approach this game. Talked to the players about that in the off season, talked to the coaches about that in the off season, talked to other coaches about it as well. So yeah, very, very introspective, but at the end of the day, we did not play well enough against a very, very good opponent to get the W. So obviously there needs to be more time spent on it and more discussion spent on things that we have to do outside of what we did that game week. There's a lot of things. And I think as you guys know, I came into that. I had already planned out what I was going to talk to you guys about, and already planned out what I was going to say to you. And there's a lot of things that go into it. So there's nothing more than I wanted to do is walk into that press conference and after the game talk about why that game was different and also where we were headed. But again, I'll save that for the appropriate moment.
In the back, Allie.
Hey, Coach.
Hey, Holly.
That was loud. You've talked in the past about not needing a loss or a setback to learn a lesson. Obviously, you have one now. What, from a mindset set perspective, what does a loss do for the team in terms of now you know what that feels like? You don't want to feel it again. Is there also kind of like a pitfall coming off of a loss where you, as you've mentioned, don't want to make that turn into two? You're going into an emotional week here with the whiteout at home, and that game always kind of comes with some difficulties. Just the environment is crazy.
Yep.
How do you address all of that from a mindset perspective?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I think a couple things, right? I think the first thing is I have read and seen other programs that felt like they were loose. They were not dotting the I's, crossing the T's. They were able to get away with things from a talent standpoint. And then after a loss, it was, hey, no more being late to meetings, no more doing this, no more doing that. That's not our issue. We run a tight ship. The guys do a really good job. They understand what the expectations and standards are. It's not like that. It's not like you need a setback and we're going to start doing things different. If the process is the right process, it really shouldn't change a whole lot week to week. And I think that's one of the big reasons why we have been so consistent. But I think to John's point, I do think it causes everybody to be introspective, and it starts with that, right? After the game, the first thing everybody better do, and I think the best teams do this, they start looking at themselves. That's the coaches, that's the players, that's the offense, that's the defense, that's the special teams. Teams that the culture is not right, they're pointing fingers in the other direction. I know it sounds crazy, but I've been around coaches that they're blaming the players for why plays don't make sense. The players are blaming the coaches. The offense is blaming the defense, or the defense is blaming the offense, or special teams, or whatever it may be. And we don't have that. I was very proud of the guys in the locker room after the game. I think Devon has done a really good job in locker rooms with messaging to the overall team. When the seniors get up in the locker room and address the team after each win or after each game, I think Devon's been really good there. So for us, I think more than anything, it's about being introspective. And I think for me, as the head coach, it's not just the things this week. It's all the things that go into building a championship program, making sure the things that I can control, I'm controlling, and the things that are outside of my control, I'm getting the right amount of support to get those things done too.
Over here, Audrey.
James, going back to the goal line sequence there, can you just maybe kind of take us through what it's like? Obviously, heat of the moment, there's a lot of stuff going on, but the conversation on the headset, and were you obviously like, is there any back and forth? Is it even possible to say for you to maybe interject, or how does that maybe kind of unfold?
Yeah, we've talked about this before. There's really no discussions on a headset during a play call. Those things lead to second guessing. Those things lead to delay of games. Those things don't typically lead to where you want to go. So what will happen, though, is, like I've mentioned to you guys before, after a play call, there could be, hey, you may want to think about this. We haven't pushed the ball down the field enough. I'm not talking obviously in the goal line, but those types of things. Hey, Andy, from a sequencing standpoint, in this situation, we got 4 downs. So let's call the third down, understanding you have 2 downs in this situation. But yeah, not discussions about a call when the call is made. The last thing you want to do is the person that's calling the game, that the head coach or somebody else is interjecting in those critical moments and making that coordinator to hesitate. What you're really trying to do is those discussions are happening all week long with your preparation and your planning at what's best in those moments. And then as the game goes on, how things are going. The run game's working well, the pass game's working well, whatever it may be. That's the emphasis. Obviously, after you run the ball vertical 2 times and you get stuffed, everybody's telling you to be creative. If you're creative in this moments and they don't work, then everybody's telling you you got too cute and you should have ran the ball north and south. So hindsight is 2020. I totally get it. At the end of the day, you could make a lot of arguments. Could we have been more creative? Could we have got the ball into Tyler Warren's hands in that moment? From a technique and fundamental standpoint, could we have gotten more push? All those things. The reality is, back to when we won a big game in the Big Ten championship game on 4th and 1. We made a stop on a 4th and 1 to win a game. The team we were playing didn't pick it up. There's the difference in the game. And the reality is you got to be able to get a yard when you want to get a yard. I don't know if it's necessarily about the play call. Play calls matter and count. Don't misinterpret what I'm saying. But at the end of the day, you got to be able to get a yard from a mentality standpoint, from a fundamental standpoint, from a schematic standpoint, and all those things come into place there. But I've also been a part. You're creative on 1st down. You're creative on 2nd down. You throw it on 3rd down, and then everybody says you got too cute. So at the end of the day, we didn't get the ball in the end zone, and when that happens, you're going to be second guessed and you're going to be critiqued. And I get it.
In the front, Neil.
James, the altercation with the fan or the interaction with the fan, is that regrettable? And also, if you could, the last minute of the first half, you let 20 seconds or so go by, but you still ended up down there. Did that play out the way you wanted it to?
Yeah. At the end of the day, you want to make sure that you can get all your plays run. The timeouts give us the ability and the flexibility to do that. And then you also want to try to score with the least amount of time left on the clock as possible. So I was comfortable with that. The interaction, yeah, I'm really good with it. Someone screaming at me and my daughter within a couple feet as we're walking off the field. And I'm good with that. That comes with the territory. I asked the young man what his name was. To me, it's like posting something. If you're going to post something, post it with your picture and your name and own what you post. And if you're going to say something, own it. I just asked the gentleman what his name was. Started stuttering, backed up, and didn't say his name. So critiques and opinions come. That's part of the territory. I get it. I asked the young man what his name was.
Over here on the right, Tyler.
Hey, James. A variety of your veteran players in postgame told us that they were aiming to earn an opportunity to play Ohio State again this season. I'd like to follow up on that with kind of 2 angles for you. One, was that rematch potential part of your message in the postgame? And 2, how do you feel about your veterans being openly public about their desire to play Ohio State for a second time in 2024?
Yeah. I'm totally good with those guys speaking how they felt at the moment. I'm totally fine with that. I'm totally fine with them having enough confidence and having enough grit and determination and anger at the moment that they want a second shot. And in today's college football, that's a reality in ways that it probably hasn't been in the past. It wasn't my message in the locker room, but there was people talking about it. And I'm totally fine with that. I'm totally fine with that. I think what the message is, the way I interpret the message is that we want to play well enough to continue playing as a team and as a family as long as we possibly can. And again, in today's college football, those things that you just said, they're possible. They're realistic.
In the back left, Andrew.
Which I also think is probably cool about college football now, where that wasn't the case in the past. You'd have to wait a full calendar year, depending on the schedule. So, yeah, I think that's a cool thing for college football.
Coach, I wanted to ask about the interception there at the end of the first half. Drew, after the game, took responsibility for that interception, as you would expect a quarterback to do. But given the ability that something like that can do to someone's confidence, do you talk to him about things like that in a play, which I don't think anyone actually thought it was his fault? Do you talk to him about that to try to make sure something like that doesn't affect his confidence?
Yeah, from what I have seen from Drew in his career here at Penn State and then his evolution over the last 12 months, I don't think it will. When you do what he did against USC, I don't see that impacting him. And to me, I want the receivers coach to take responsibility for that. I want the receiver to take responsibility for that. I want Drew to take responsibility for that. I want Danny to take responsibility for that. I want Andy to take responsibility for that. I take responsibility for that. So what I mean by that is, I want Drew to say to himself, all red zone throws, I'm going to throw in a way that are high, that the receiver's going to catch it or nobody's going to catch it. You can also make the argument he made the perfect throw. But the way we teach those throws, we want them to be high where your receiver's reaching for the ball. And if he doesn't catch it, it's out the back of the end zone. But the reality is I want my receiver and my receivers coach to take total responsibility for it. And I think if everybody approaches it that way, then that's a healthy way to approach it. Then the coaches look, did we put the player in that position enough time in practice? The quarterback, the receiver, did we put those guys in that position enough times that they have the fundamentals, the technique, the confidence to make that play at that moment? And that's what we should all be doing. And if we haven't, then that's where the introspection happens. That's where the changes happen, or the adjustments happen to make sure those things do happen on a regular basis. But to me, that's the healthy way. Drew should take responsibility for it. The receiver should take responsibility for it. The coaches should take responsibility for it. Where to me it's problematic is where guys get interviewed after the game and they say, that wasn't me. That guy's got to make a play. That's a problem. That leads to things that are unhealthy. So in a lot of ways, I'm very proud of how that was handled. I think to be honest with you, it's very telling, from the things that you guys are saying and how our guys handled it, the things that Chris and Greg told me, how our guys have handled it. I'm proud of how they've handled it because everybody's taking ownership and everybody wants the next opportunity, and the next opportunity comes in Washington. And the more opportunities we handle like that, then we still have a chance to do the things we talked about in the beginning of the season and what our fans want so badly and what the Letterman wants so badly and the alumni want so badly and what that fan was yelling at me walking off the field wants so badly. I totally get it. Again, you do not fill up 111,000 seat stadium without passion and commitment, and we appreciate all of that. Can it go too far sometimes? Yes. Should it be addressed? Yes. I saw something with Jason Kelsey. Jason Kelsey was coming to State College. I wanted him to have a wonderful experience. I didn't get a chance to meet him or see him. I saw something that I wasn't very, very proud of. I wish that didn't happen. But there's also in 2024, I love that person, there was a consequence to his action. So can it go too far sometimes? And we talk about the passion and all those things being great, yes, but that also doesn't excuse bad behavior at times. So it comes with the territory, but that doesn't make it right. If that makes sense.
In the middle, Shane.
Hey, Coach. We've talked about the final.
Sorry, I couldn't find you. Sorry.
So we talked about the failed goal line, possession, and then the
Say that again. I'm sorry.
The kind of not being able to punch it in at the end.
Yes, sir.
And then the defense kind of not being able to get that stop. In terms of your new coordinators, how do you assess Andy and Tom and Justin and how they handled that game from a play calling and just overall standpoint?
Yeah, so a couple things. The first thing that I'll do to try to take the emotion out of it is you look at the statistics, right? Where are we at statistically on defense? Where are we at statistically on offense? Where are we at statistically on special teams? And I think one of the things that that helps with is it takes the emotion out of it, it takes the bias out of it, and it also takes who they're following out of it. Because who you follow has an impact on the perception of the job you're doing. That's number one. And I think number two, that I made very clear, starting with myself and the entire staff, on Sunday morning after we all graded the film and went through everything and everybody had their chance to talk about how their positions played, recruiting, updates, how the weekend went, all of it is I made sure everybody in the room clearly understood it again. And it starts with me. The buck stops with me, is everybody's in that room to beat that opponent and opponents like that. So the 6-0 or the 7-0 leading up to that is awesome. And we appreciate it and we don't take it for granted and all the hard work that goes into it. But we've done that. So the reality is everybody in that room is in that room based on these type of games. And that's why you're there. And I want to make sure everybody clearly understands that because I clearly understand it. Trust me. I clearly understand that. And I want to make sure that everybody in the room understands that as well. We've done some good things and we got a lot to be proud of. But at the end of the day, these are the type of games that we're ultimately going to be evaluated on. And we embrace that and we don't hide from that. And we appreciate that. But I also want to make sure that the guys like Terry Smith and Andy Frank and Kevin Threlkill and Chuck Losey, the guys that have been there from the beginning, I also recognize what those guys have done for this program from the beginning and what we took over. And you got to balance the both. But I think that message got across very, very clearly, just like it got across very clearly to me again.
We got time for one more. Way in the back. T. Frank.
James, how you doing?
Hey, T. Frank.
A question about your passing game. You mentioned earlier getting your standard or traditional run game with the running backs going. Has that had an effect on the passing game? And more to the point, do you think there's a disconnect between Drew's I don't want to say Drew's portion of the offense, but the passing portion, the progression portion of the passing game and the rest of the offense? And is there a solve for that?
Yeah, again, I think, and I think it's a good question. I think, again, competition plays a factor in all of this. It's like we can't just answer these questions and act like the competition does not factor. It does. So what was different in that game, except for the opening drive, we weren't able to stay on schedule. The more you're able to stay on schedule, the more shots you're able to take down the field. What I thought we did a good job in that game is making sure that the defensive ends who are talented didn't wreck the game like they have in the past. And I thought we did a very good job from a game planning and from a plan perspective to make sure that certain players in certain positions didn't impact the game more than they needed to. And I thought we did that. Even not staying on schedule where we had too many third and longs, that makes third down difficult. So it does a ton of things. It makes third down more difficult when you're not on schedule, whether that is the run game or whether that is high percentage passing game, shots down the field, all those things. So the run game is critical to that. The opponent plays a factor in it. But again, at the end of the day, we got to do a really good job of putting our players in the best position to be successful, to be able to manufacture yards and points against those type of opponents. And the reality is, when you're doing things to stop the DNs, that creates more challenges inside. If you got more double teams on the end, then you got less double teams at tackle. You can't take it all away. So that's where the chess game comes. And not only is it the competition in terms of the personnel, it's the competition in terms of the coordinators as well. It's all of it. So I think your point is a fair one. Yeah, I think the run game definitely impacts the passing game, specifically on third down and specifically on your ability to take shots down the field. All those things go hand in hand, no different than on defense. Getting them off schedule is typically when our sack production goes way up and our 3 and outs go way up. Why? Because they're off schedule.
Thank you very much, Coach.